Okay, first things first. This got a little longer than I had anticipated. So if you want, we can, cut off some of the tail end of it, but I'm expecting it to go roughly about an hour. And some of that's because I talk too much. Actually, let's just get into it. Start. The first part, I've got a section here on history, and I'm not a historian, and certainly not a scholar, but I got involved in the history of this when I was actually trying to trace the origins of the Monotype Grotesques, and specifically a few other grotesques. And a lot of questions popped up, and it eventually led to some surprising answers. And I'd have to say that really what I'm dealing with right now is a theory, and I'm hoping that there are a few people here tonight who are going to be able to say, you're full of it, or that's really interesting, but did you think of this, or what about that? So in one sense, I basically want to share this and open it up, because I think it's important. When I approached Alan some years ago and said, I'd like to do the, take a stab at the Monotype Grotesques, I said, I referred to them at the time. I said, I think they're hidden gems. They're kind of hidden gems. I later discovered that they were actually buried gems, but we'll get to that. We went back and forth on this, and eventually he said, yes, go for it. And so I started. I was excited. I had a page like this out of one of the Monotype catalogs, and I thought, I got a hold of Robin Nicholas at Salford's, and I said, can you help me out with material? And he said, glad to, and everything is wonderful. And I started working on the first weight, and I was enjoying myself, and I thought, I remember going to bed the first night thinking, this is a piece of cake. I'm going to have this done in no time. That was 8 years ago. So, take what I have to say with a grain of salt. I'm not entirely realistic. It turned out that this really was some of the best stuff we had were the pages out of the Monotype catalog. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Monotype produced this original range early on, between 1926 and 31. They never touched it after that. They made various stabs at it, but it basically was just left. It was a highly successful range in its own right. It was very successful in the UK. Dave Ferry told me that he said, it was just, for him, this was Britain more than Gill. Matthew Carter helped me a little bit at one point, and Matthew said, he said, I grew up with these typefaces. He said, I know them. They're just part of my DNA. And they were big in Switzerland. They were big in Germany. Not so much in North America, which had less to do with the typefaces than with the fact that there weren't that many Monotype installations in North America. I did find out that Monson in Chicago had the whole series, and in fact, there's records in the archives that Monotype cut a 5.5-point range of the regular for Monson. The trouble with Monson was they renamed them Monson Gothic. So nobody knew they were buying the Monotype Grotesques. So I kept running across things like that. So anyways, it was like, my first big job was to find out more information and material about these typefaces. So we found this letter in the archives from 1954, and this really kind of sums up basically the whole story. There is practically no historical available on the above series. Design was based on Berthold's grotesque ideal, which should in fact be ideal grotesque, spelled ESK. And then further down, he says, in 1939, italics were added to series 125 and 215. Well, that was actually 1929. And that last line slayed me after a while. We trust this information will suffice. Well, of course it didn't. And this letter became emblematic of something for me. Basically, it was kind of the attitude the corporation had towards the series, and I thought, what's with this? So I kept looking. Robin found this in the archives, a proof sheet of Ideal Grotesque from Berthold in 10 and 8-point Didot of showing of the light range, and obviously, you know, these are the kind of proofs that were pulled when you bought a font of type. So whether Monotype bought, you know, a couple of fonts of Ideal Grotesque or whatever, we don't know. We just found this. It's stamped. It's clearly from Berthold. It's stamped from Monotype, and somebody took the initiative of putting on that it was going to be the 126 series. And in actual fact, this wasn't that uncommon a practice. We do know that Monotype redrew the whole series. They drew the series from scratch. It wasn't a case of, you know, sort of just lifting Ideal Grotesque. They also made a number of changes, which they had been instructed to do. Chief amongst them was dropping the crossbars, the height of the crossbars on mostly the capital letters, and changing a few things. One of the things that was interesting for me also was the sharp S in the 8-point, and it apparently only in the 8-point. So, you know, we know that, you know, the sharp S was being experimented with back into the 19th century, but it was just interesting to see it used in, you know, produced in at least one range. But more to the point for me, when I looked at this, I thought, okay, that typeface looks very familiar. But I wasn't sure, and I wanted to see more. And Robin said, "We don't have any more. This is it. This is the, you know, all we've got." And I said, "Oh." So I asked around. I talked to people in Germany, and we really no clear idea what Ideal Grotesque actually looked like, what the remaining ranges. And then one day I got a call from Robin, and he said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Good." He said, "I've found a catalog." And I said, "Oh man, I'd love to see that." He said, "Good." I put it in the mail. And at which point I just went, you know, apoplectic, because I thought, you know, this may well, you know, as far as we know, it's the only catalog in the world. And he entrusted it to the Post. I don't know what the Royal Mail's like, but I can tell you what Canada Post is like. So I spent 3 or 4, you know, sort of days staring out the front window, waiting for the mailman. And eventually it did show up, and I looked through it, and I thought, this is a nice typeface. I really was impressed with it. I thought there's some nice characters in there. But it really does look familiar, and I started to see things in there, and I went, oh, I've seen this typeface before. Then there was also a very peculiar lowercase g in the bold, not in the lights, but only in the bold. And I thought, gosh, that's interesting. So Indra Kuverschmidt and I had been talking about the grotesque for some time, and she said there's a tie-in between Ideal Grotesque and Venus. And I said, really? I said, I thought there was, but I said, you know, I was afraid to say anything. So she sent me some material, and we talked back and forth and tried different things. And one of the things that was really interesting for me was that and for her as well, actually, was that odd-shaped lowercase g in the bold, but not in the light. And it seems, and we're a little hesitant to say this, but it seems that Venus and Berthold's Ideal Grotesque are basically the same typeface. She doesn't know how that came about. We thought it might have been part of the Wagner and Schmidt process, where Wagner and Schmidt were making matrices that they were selling, identical matrices they were selling to different foundries throughout Europe, especially with sans serifs. But she doesn't think that Wagner and Schmidt made these. We know that she found out that Venus came from the Flinch foundry in 1907, which was later bought by Bauer in 1916. Berthold's ideal grotesque came out of the Klinkhardt foundry in 1908 and was purchased by Berthold in 1917, I believe. So somewhere in there may have been something. But we're still working on that, and we need a lot of help. I find it difficult on this side of the Atlantic to get any real material on these grotesques. Indra didn't help the matter by saying that she finds it just as hard in Germany. Because I thought, really? There's got to be something over there. Before I get in with the history, I just wanted to show you, these are two proofs. Now, when Pierpont put this, Frank Pierpont, who was the works manager at Monotype, put this face into production, one of the things that was decided was all those sort of Art Nouveau influences that both Venus and Ideal Grotesque had, those high-waisted crossbars, which really was a direct result, I think, of the Art Nouveau influence, because Venus was done in 1907, which was really about the height of the Art Nouveau movement. And they were instructed to lower all of those. And one of the things that I found with these two trial showings, the first one on the left from April the 4th, 1926, where they made all the changes they wanted, but they were still using the U-shaped Y. And then basically 2 months later, they've recut it with the V-shaped Y. And I think that was pretty significant because that was one of the things in the end that made the Monotype grotesques as useful and as functional as they were for so long. I think I really do feel that if they had kept that U-shaped Y, they wouldn't have, their longevity would have been in jeopardy. We don't know if there was a trial 2. If there is, it's gone the way of Postscript Type 2. So this is going to take me a few minutes because this is actually significant. I set out to do a little timeline. I thought I want to just do a little timeline and basically isolate those grotesques. So I thought, well, the best way to do this is with specimen covers. So, you look around, it's not that difficult to get specimen covers. And, and especially because I had found the most elusive one of all, the Ideal Grotesque from Berthold. The only one I could never find a cover for was Monotype Grotesque. And I couldn't find anything. And I went, what's going on here? So I've got a pretty good collection of Monotype recorders, and with access to the archives in London, I said, is there any material? Nothing. And I began to go, what is going on? Like, why was nothing about this typeface? It was a successful typeface. It was a good typeface. It needs work today, but it really, in its day, there was nothing wrong with this typeface. And as far as we know, the company made quite a bit of money off it. So nothing. And then I had one of those moments where, and you feel stupid, absolutely, really stupid. And I went, 1926. Pierpont put this in. They started production in 1925. The faces were the first 3 Romans were finished in 1926. That's the year that Stanley Morison put Gill Sands in production. And I went, oh, is there a tie-in here? And then I started, it took me a while, but I started, because it was really one of those things that's like, no, it can't be. And I realized there's no secret that Pierpont, who was the works manager, and Stanley Morison, who was the typographic advisor, couldn't be put in the same room. They really disliked each other intensely. And to some extent, there probably wasn't a room big enough to hold both egos. They had done pretty malicious things to each other in the course of their working lives. Um, and I realized that Pierpont put these faces into production, and he was, he could do that. He had the position and the authority. But Morison controlled the publicity for Monotype. And if anybody in this room has any publicity material from Monotype concerning the Monotype Grotesques, I would sure like to see it, because I haven't seen anything. And it's worse than that. Any histories written about the Monotype Corporation? There was the 100th anniversary of the Monotype Recorder, which covered all the typefaces extensively. They wrote about the 2 or 3 grotesques that were done prior to this range. Not a mention of this range. Not a mention. When a couple of years ago, when the British Printing Historical Society produced that history of the Monotype Corporation, the only grotesque in the whole book, and the only one that got mentioned, was Classic Grotesque, which they used for some of the typesetting. So somehow that first letter that, where they said, well, there's practically no information, historical information on these typefaces, blah, 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 we don't know much about them and everything. I think Morison just very quietly let them go into the back room and just sort of simmer. We know that there are other letters that we have found where people have asked. There was actually one that was, in hindsight now, is actually quite funny. I think it was in 1956. They got a request from a group of Swiss printers. Could you please reduce the size of the caps in the Monotype Grotesques? Because obviously in Germany and Switzerland, those caps were a bit of a problem. So there was letters going back. The first letter said, well, we've never heard of this problem before, which wasn't actually accurate. And then the second letter, which I thought was quite funny, was they said, Mr. Morison's going to be in Switzerland in a few months, and he'll address the issue. The issue never got addressed. And every time, it seems, the corporation started to work on making any changes to the grotesques or doing anything with the family, extending it in any way, it just quietly dropped. And it's, I'm not pointing a finger, I mean, and I'm not saying that, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't think I'd want to go for coffee with or dinner with either Pierpont or Morison. But I think there's more of a story here than most of us have thought about before. And I think probably one of the reasons is because we haven't thought about it. If I hadn't embarked on this project and kept finding all these stupid loose ends and nothing happening, I probably wouldn't have noticed it either. And then of course, they kept trying. When Helvetica came out, they started in on doing some alternate characters for the range to make it look more like Helvetica. That amounted to nothing. That never went anywhere. And once Monotype picked up the license for Frutiger's Universe, then the Monotype Grotesques were dropped, and it wasn't, and they stayed that way until 1982 when Robin used them as the basis for Ariel. As this sort of grew for me, that it became less a sort of story about, oh, I'm going to make this typeface. It was like I think I wanted these typefaces to get a fair shot. Because I felt, I think they could actually, they were good typefaces. They really worked. They had problems, but I thought, let's see what happens if they have a fair shot. So that's eventually what led to the development of the Classic Grotesque family. So I'm hoping that, as I say, that I'm trying to talk to people and get this story out, because I think it'd be nice if we could actually, find out some more. We still don't know that much about Venus. We don't know that much about Ideal Grotesque. And I think there's some fascinating material in here. And, and again, as Indra's work on, dealing with, her work and research into the Wagner and Schmidt foundry is equally fascinating. I mean, and difficult for us today to sort of imagine that, that big name type foundries would buy identical matrices. But it was an accepted practice at the time. So that's my unstated goal, the one that, when you work on projects occasionally and you have a sort of inner goal that, you realize you can't say out loud, was, could those grotesques, and I think that could they become more mainstream than they have been, not this sort of ghettoized, versions that we've had so far. And that's also part of it. So I don't know, and that I have no idea. Don't know if that I've given it my best shot, and we'll just have a look briefly at some of the things that I did have to do. The caps, of course, were the first, and that was a no-brainer. I mean, they had to be small, reduced. The high-waisted caps, as I said, also had to be reduced, but I didn't like what Monotype had done. I felt they went just a bit too low. And, if you're Canadian, you're sort of, we're Canadians grow up, between, our country was settled by the French and the English, and basically still is. And we're saddled next to the United States. So, we're the kind of people that, when one group says this, another group says this, we're the guys that's sitting in the back of the room going, well, there might be another way. So I thought, let's find the other way. This typeface needs a Canadian approach. And so when I started with that, like one of those stupid questions, like how high should the crossbar be, Mama? I did actually for a while, and it's kind of stupid now that I think about it. But I'd get up in the morning, and one of the first things I would do is I'd look at the crossbars on the G, and every morning I'd go, "Oh, it's a little high. Well, it's a little high." Next morning I'd look at it and say, "That's a little low." And I did that. I must have done that for a month. It was absolutely stupid. And I honestly wish I could say that I had some sort of great insight into where I finally established the height. But I think I just wore out. And one morning I woke up and I thought, well, that's fine. And it seems to work. It's got I like the look, and it's high enough that it's not freakish. And then when you put it together with the range of the 7 weights, they seem to work. The other area that, of course, is that those returns on the lowercase g. And this is characteristic of all the grotesques. They come back and then they kind of follow the shape of the bowl. And Robin in particular said, "Are you going to keep that feature?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Gee, it would be nice." And it was one of those awkward moments because I said, "Robin, I can't because you used it in Ariel." And he's very sweet, and he said, "Oh yes, I see what you mean." And I just couldn't. I said I can't do it, and besides, I couldn't get it to work in a way that I thought was acceptable, and without looking too tight, especially at the bolder weight. So it was a lot of these changes were sort of a lot of the changes were dictated by Ariel, particularly in this series, the S. I started out, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to work with basically with the regular because, the mid-range is the key range in any series like this. So I thought, okay. And I didn't particularly like the S's in the original series because I didn't mind the light, but I didn't like the regular or the bold. They kind of looked like old sign painters' letters. But my reason for looking for a different S eventually became quite pragmatic. Working with the regular, it didn't matter what I did. I ended up doing Ariel. You don't want to be in the position of finding yourself working for days on end to produce another Ariel. Trust me. So I said, okay, this isn't getting me anywhere. And I just want to make a point here. You know, all this discussion about, you know, Ariel was, you know, ripped off from Helvetica and all that sort of stuff. In this process of doing Classic Grotesque, there were many times when I realized that I was getting, you know, stuff was venturing very close to Ariel. I never once came close to Helvetica, and I thought that was very interesting. But Ariel was more of a problem, especially the original one before Microsoft got involved. But what I realized was that the secret on this, of course, was the light range, because the light range throughout all the grotesques, Venus and Ideal, is the range that's identical. There really doesn't seem to be any difference between all those different typefaces in the lights. Sometimes the bolds have some changes, but the light holds steady throughout. And then when I started looking at the light seriously, and I realized actually it's pretty good. And the S shape isn't too bad. Little more swing than I wanted, and a bit large. But I thought, okay. And then once I started working with that and building that up into the bold weights, then I found that I was getting okay. Now I've got a character that does not look like Ariel, and worked right across the board again with all the weights. So I was happy with that. Actually began to thank Ariel. In a small way. The other character that has always been a defining character, and I got this mostly from people like Dave Ferry and to some extent from Matthew, was the lowercase a with the high full bowl, and that's really, and I thought I want to keep that, and the regular A in the Monotype Grotesque is actually out of character with the rest of the character set in the regular series. It's always been heavy and stands out. It also has that quite a kink where the bowl comes off the vertical stroke on the right. And I tried to make that work. And every time I looked at proofs, I can't tell you how many proofs. Wish I had invested in a paper company. And I finally said, you know what, I can't do it. I can't do the kink, because every time I look at it, you know, that's all I see. But I didn't mind. And so working with that, I was able to get, you know, a character that was, again, worked with the rest of the series and worked with the rest of the characters in each weight. And I was very pleased with that. I'm not showing very many accents tonight. But we just, you know, we regularized the accents. I had some help with Linotype. Actually, thankfully, they stepped, you know, they said, look, we like your accents, but we're going to do a few things with them. And it was, actually, it was funny. It was flattering and it was funny, because they sent me some proofs at one point, and with this long notice, you know, an email about the extensive changes they had made. And I looked at the proofs and I thought, my glasses must, you know, something's wrong here because I can't figure it. And one of the proofs, they had shortened 3 or 4 of the macrons by 2 units. And I thought, well, that's a lot of work for that. I'm not really sure it was necessary. But anyway, so they helped, and so we got. Anyways, we ended up with a good set of accents that the Germans are happy with. So I'm happy. couple of, minor things. I decided to early on that I was going to get rid of all those full returns on characters, and even on the two, and just eliminate those completely. They were awkward for me and didn't seem to work. I serifed the one, and I was very pleased with that, and that's in the default set, and that's it. I liked it. And one of the other things I did that went throughout the whole font was I thought, how do I get this to look so it's a little less stiff than a lot of sans serifs? So I actually eliminated most of the vertical and horizontal stroke endings, so that you see on the one where the starting stroke comes down and it's off on an angle, and I just found that was a way of keeping some minor interest in the font and take away the mechanical look, which is always a danger in the sans serif. The fractions, were a no-brainer. I was very surprised that they were still using those fractions in the digital versions. But I know that the corporation had a long-standing policy of when they digitized typefaces from the early, when they first started digitizing typefaces, they were under strict instructions not to change anything. They couldn't change, not even by so much as a unit. And so fractions set at 9-point in metal would work perfectly well, just don't work today. One of the things that I was very surprised at was that all the monetary signs were different widths. And I thought that would have been taken care of. I also realized that the Brits never did understand the cent sign. So now there's a huge set of monetary characters as well. So and all the same width, thank God, and a full complete set of fractions in all the different fonts. But in actual fact, with the numerators and everything, you can make any fraction you want. So I'm not even sure why we have dedicated fractions. We talk a lot nowadays about reviving typefaces and in different analogies and why we do this and that and the other thing. And I think the one metaphor that I've never heard used is it's like remodeling a house. You find a house that you really like, and you're excited. You finally get you get it at a price you can afford, and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, we got to do some things. Well, and some of it's pretty straightforward. Generally the electrical is going to have to be changed. Plumbing usually has to be changed. Kitchen almost always has to be changed. Nobody wants a 90-year-old kitchen. Building codes change, so things have to be updated. And at some point, and I did run into this at one point, it was like, and actually we ran into it, my wife and I ran into it with our house too, was where you wake up one morning and say, would have been a lot easier just to build a new house. But at the end of the day, you still want to keep something, and you're no longer even sure why. But you keep going. One of the things that I did discover, and this has been sort of long-standing with me, like any type designer, I'm a firm believer in ligatures if they don't draw attention to themselves. And I kept looking at all of these, and the FI is actually quite mild. The FFI in the grotesque was pretty bizarre. And in some of the weights, it was absolutely ridiculous. So even though we have the whole set, the whole set of F ligatures, none of them are designed to look like proper ligatures, because I just didn't think I'm not sure that sans, very often the ligatures to me don't work in sans. Some things were just personal. I really didn't like the German double S that they had in the fonts. It just seemed weak and didn't fit. and of course, the register mark and all that needed some work. And then the OE diphthong, that sort of reverse D was once upon a time was considered acceptable and sexy, and really isn't any longer. And my wild extravagance, my breaking out, was to shear off the end terminal, horizontal terminal on the T. Worried about that. Did it throughout the whole range. It made sense to me. It added some life. Strangely enough, it allowed me to set the T just ever so slightly tighter. And then when it was still followed by, like a lowercase h or any other character, there was just the error was still there. And it didn't seem to sort of fill in. And I was pleased with that. But I did worry. I thought, people are going to worry about. And nobody said anything. And I thought, So finally, I asked somebody, a designer in Toronto, and I said, so are you okay with that sheared T? And she said, oh, that's kind of cool. I didn't notice that before. So I thought, okay, fine. There's apparently things you don't have to worry about. Putting in, of course, with a full range of old style figures, I was, the caps, the lining figures now match with the caps. Some things like the ampersand, just get the top opened up and just try to get slightly better shape, and even with things like parens and braces and that, even though it's a sans, they can still have some shape, and so. It was a thorough house cleaning, and I'm not sure how much of the Monotype Grotesques are left in this. Actually, no. You know what? There's still quite a bit. One of the things that I really wanted to do right from the beginning, because in those grotesques they were pretty loose about whether the two-story or the single-story G, and so there's at least two fonts. I can't remember. I believe two fonts in the original series that have a two-story G, and the others have the single story. And I thought I like them both. So it was actually the first alternate character that I did, and it's set up. The fonts are all set up. All 56 of them are set up so that if you can run it with just the two-story G and nothing else changes, and it's a delightful look. But as we all know, whether people use that feature or not is another matter. Most people and most designers that I know take fonts right out of the box and that's it. And most of them don't know how to access an alternate character anyways. When it came to the italic, we had a big discussion. I originally said, I think we should go with the sloped Roman to match all the grotesques. I got everybody at Monotype on board. They all said, okay, yeah, we agree. That's a good idea. The minute I got everybody on board, I realized that I really am a designer, because then I said, no, it's not going to work. So I said, I think, I don't think we can do a sans in this day and age that's essentially a sloped Roman. And so I did a more cursive style. But I said, what I want to do is I'll do the alternate characters. So if anyone should want to do it, then basically they're going to have a sloped Roman in the fonts. And again, I doubt very much if I'll ever see that. We may. I also got to reduce the angle of the italic, which has helped considerably with readability, especially at smaller sizes. That opened the floodgates for just a few. I'm not, again, part of this is pragmatic. I'm not a big advocate of a lot of alternate characters. But I thought, you know what? A single story A to go and a G, and I got to put in the original Y, which I thought was kind of cool, and then the L with the curved ending, which would actually that is kind of nice. I was very pleased with the way that works. The only thing I didn't do was an italic two-story G. And to be honest, I don't know if that was a mistake or not. I couldn't seem to get it to work so that it looked decent, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to leave it out. But every font has the same things. Actually, every font is identical, all 56. So if you set something in one weight and decide to change the weight, you're not going to get a surprise. One of the things that also I did that was going to 7 weights. I kind of prefer 6. I think 6 is realistic, and I think that's my limitation, because I find, beyond 6, it's like, can I make these distinctions? But I had a very, very fruitful discussion with Matthew Carter about the series, and he made a suggestion, which cost me a lot of work. But I was very pleased, with the suggestion, and it was brilliant. But and I realized that it allowed me to stick that one extra weight in there, the medium. And I normally wouldn't have done that because the weights are very close together. But I looked at it and I thought, we don't have multiple masters. We don't, people, we don't have ways, people handling different sizes and different problems in settings, like, reversing out of 4-color, reversing out of, black, anything. Just even weight changes or color changes. And I thought, what I realized I ended up with was basically 3 text faces, a light and a medium and a regular. So depending on the designer, depending on the situation, and I've used this myself where they actually do work. I was a bit surprised. I wasn't sure it would. But it actually does work, and it's a little bit of fine-tuning. And I don't expect that many people to do it, but I thought, good graphic designer is going to be able to take that and actually be able to do something. So I felt it was worth the extra work. And it justified having, 3 weights that were that close together. I may be rationalizing, but it has worked. And I did hear from one designer who said, you know what, I really appreciate that. It has helped a lot in the magazine. So I thought, cool, that was worthwhile. This actually is, there's nothing special about this. This is the timeline, just reviewed. So Accidents Grotesque across the top, and Helvetica at the bottom, and then the 3 grotesques in the middle. And, so the Venus Ideal, and then the Monotype, and then Classic. And I'm obviously prejudiced, but I don't see now why these ranges of grotesques, and I think sort of melding all the originals together, has produced a typeface that I think it can work in the world, can meet. I've seen it used now. The original series was released 4 years ago. And I've been incredibly pleased with what I've seen. It also works online, which although I was really trying to do that when I was doing the face. You never know for sure, but it does actually. But and I mean, I'm not pitting it against Helvetica. I'm not pitting it against Accidents Grotesque, but I think those original 3 grotesques do have a place, and I think they can work. So we'll see. This is my small cap moment. I did this. Some of you will find this funny because it was like at one point somebody said, "Did you do small caps?" And I said, "Oh God, yeah." So this is my way of saying I did small caps. And I realized when at that point, I thought, oh God, nowadays small caps to me are, somebody might as well just ask me, did you use it? Did you put in a lowercase a? Of course you do small caps. So then you got 56 small caps. So This is the basic series that was done 4 years ago, and although it has just been updated, the updating has nothing to do with the design. The updating is just actually character extensions internally, mostly, new monetary symbols and different, upgrading to WG1, I believe. And it's been a good magazine face, which I was a little surprised at. I didn't know if it would actually work that well as a magazine face, but it does. And people really like the italic, which I thought was kind of interesting. Everybody, it's a funny thing. I've had a number of people say they like my italics, which I find kind of ironic because I hate doing italics. And I've never done one that I'm satisfied with. But if people say they like them, then I'm very pleased. But I'm not sure if it keeps me. I'm lazy, so I'm not sure it keeps me from improving them. The first range extension was a no-brainer. Was a compressed. To me, the obligatory compressed. But this became fun. I started to enjoy this after I got into it, and it was about, not sure what, about 55% of the regular range. So very, almost 50%. Started this with multiple masters and built it up, but I eventually, because I changed a lot of things, and I put in those curved returns on a lot of the round characters. I didn't want to do the full Stevenson-Blake routine, but I wanted to just make sure that I didn't have a picket fence approach. And I basically ended up redrawing the whole thing. I just, which added a lot more work than I was expecting. I really did think I'd be able to do this largely, through Font Lab, but I just couldn't get it to have any kind of look. It's actually not a bad text face. I mean, not if you set more than 10 words, it doesn't necessarily work. But I've actually, a woman in Toronto has been using it in a magazine, and she's actually set some sidebars that I was quite surprised. I thought, not necessarily what I would want to do, but better than a lot of things I've seen. I'm still very pleased with the look. It seems to work. And again, I did this with the alternate lowercase g because I just thought, I'm not going to give up on this stuff. I think it makes a nice change and gives a completely different look. And I'd like to see, I hope people, can start actually, exploring that, but we still have to work with Adobe to make sure that people know how to access these characters. Next came the condensed range, which I ended doing almost in an obligatory manner. It's like, okay, need a condensed, okay, let's get the condensed. And I was sort of totally indifferent to it, and I think this is kind of interesting. I was actually quite indifferent to it. I mean, not in a negative way, but it just wasn't, it wasn't sort of doing anything for me like the compressed did. And it wasn't until the whole range was finished and actually started to see it. I had a woman in Toronto testing it for me, and I began to realize that this actually is the workhorse of the family, and especially, very good at explaining complex ideas, and I'm finding myself now going, and I think it's kind of interesting because I was a little more indifferent to it. It came out so well. I think sometimes when when you really get caught up in something, you color it a little bit too much. But this face, this one has been doing a lot of work. I'm really shocked. And in magazines, you can set a lot. And I didn't think you could do that much with a condensed. And then I got this was almost my favorite at one point. Was I just wanted to do the extended, and this one I think I did for myself. I don't care about anybody else. And I realized after I'd finished it, that what I really liked was something I never had when I was younger, which was, if you were working with extended faces, like how many times did you get to set something, in an extended bold and then use an italic, an extended italic, and I thought, and I went, wow, an extended small caps. So at that point I went, okay, this is like a dream that I never even knew I had. And of course, all the alternate characters. And we went through this. I gave this presentation earlier, and asked people if they, could see what one of the changes in the actual setting. And it took a little while, but one woman finally realized that the last two Ys were the alternate UYs, and the other two were the VYs. And I find that kind of interesting, that you can mix them. I'm not sure that I would want to do that too often, but it did work. And interestingly enough, for me, when I made all four Ys as the UYs, it was too much. It just took over. But it was funny, just the last two words, and it seemed to work quite well. So that's the family. This is the 56 weights, configurations. I'm going to go out on a limb and put the ellipses in the end because very similar to the thing with the italics and changing my mind. We all agreed. I mean, Monotype agreed. They wanted to let's release the Latin and see how it sells. And I said, yes, you're right, absolutely. So, anyways, I've already started work on the Greek and the Cyrillic. So they've been very, they've been saying, like, don't say anything, and don't make any promises. But I also said, it's stupid in today's world to produce a range like this and not go, into that next step. So I have no idea when it'll be finished, but we're making good progress, and I'm pleased. I need a break. 56 typefaces by yourself is not something I would recommend, except if you're James Montalbano. It was the only man I know that can do this and remain sane. You are sane, aren't you, James?
When the fashion magazines call it one of the ultra thin weights.
Yeah.